born. But then I didn't live there very long. In other words, I lived most of the time in Marshall County, except what time we lived in Paducah.
Mm-hmm.
We moved Paducah in 1936.
Now, your dad was Arthur Jackson. We were never kin to one another, but since your father's brother was my uncle by marriage, Rob Jackson married Ida Irvin.
That's right. That's right.
My grandfather's sister.
That's right.
So it kind of seemed like members of the family in a way.
That's right.
Now, Rudy, who was your mother?
Darnell. Ellie Darnell.
Well,
That was Sidney Darnell's daughter.
Uh-huh.
You know, she had several brothers. Uncle Leon, Skillet, the one they called Skillet Darnell.
Uh-huh.
Uncle Hardin Darnell, Wilson Darnell, Elsie Darnell. And
Do you know anything about
Carter.
either set of your grandparents, who
Yeah.
they were?
yeah, Grandpa Jackson, Uncle Jim, everybody, you know, don't you remember him?
Oh, I certainly do.
Well, that was my granddaddy,
Mm-hmm.
and he lived his last year, well, he's living there when he died, where Miss Tucker lives now, Miss Corbett Tucker. See,
Right
he owned
across-
that farm.
Right
Corbett.
across the road from what's now my farm.
Yeah, right down the road, across
Yeah.
the road there. They sold that to Corbett Tucker
Yeah.
after his death. And I remember Grandpa real well. Remember quite a bit about him. They had lived several different. I remember when he lived where Preacher's wife lives now. There's a big two-story house there.
Mm-hmm.
He owned that farm. We called it the Penny Place. Clarence Penny, I believe, lived there one time. But Grandpa bought it. And of course, he lived where he owned that farm where Connors lives now, where Jerry Connors lived before where Gusty lives.
Next to the Captain Fulton place, I called it.
Well,
anyway.
Well, no, I'm speaking of now of on up there by Newitt Edwards' place. You know where Herbert Connors' widow lives now.
Yes, Gusty.
You know, Gusty. You know where she lives now.
I surely do.
Well, now, Grandpa owned that way back.
now
And he owned all the land back down to Wageburg, all down in there.
you've gotten out of my reach there.
Yeah.
And you are. How many children were there in your father's family, father and mother? You had brothers and sisters?
Oh, yeah.
didn't
Yeah. They were, all together, there was one that died before I was born, Jesse
Mhm.
Jackson. I never remember him. That was my oldest brother. In other words, there were 8 of us, and 2 of them, you should remember Willie, but I don't guess you did. He was 21 years old. He died in 1930.
I don't,
You don't remember
that.
him?
No,
Well, anyway, then you remember Toy.
I remember him.
Well, now he's just 2 years older than me.
Uh-huh.
Toy, then me, then Grace that married James Gilbert, then Paul, then Roy. You knew Roy
Well,
Lies.
Roy and I were in the same high school class.
Y'all
of course,
called him Lies, didn't you?
we did. He was in a play and played a character named Lies, and ever after they called him that.
Yeah. Then, of course, Daisy married Kermit Lee. You know, she's the baby.
Now,
So there's
your dad and your mother, after he retired from farming, I guess, didn't he move into Hardin?
yeah, and sure did. Yeah, he lived. Well, when he passed away, he's living there where Ewan Miller and Betty lives. That was their place.
Mhm.
I sold that to Ewan and Betty after he passed away. After him, my mother died. Well, I sold that.
After she died.
Yeah, if she died,
Where did
I
you
sold
go?
it.
Where did you go to school?
Union Hill.
Well, isn't that something?
See, there was a road from where we lived. It went back through what we call the Irving Woods. Came out over Brady McKendry places. I think they've opened that road up again now. And the school was just across the other side of Highway 80.
Yes.
You remember the old school there?
Yes, I do remember
Yeah.
that.
Well, that's where I went
It
to
wasn't
school.
far from Peggy Ann Spring.
Well, yeah, now it was Peggy Ann, that was over by the church. Peggy Ann's by the church. Now the school that I went
couldn't
was
have
over
been-
here by, well, I don't know who lives there now. You know where Brady McKendry place?
Well, the gardeners live down the
Well,
road.
yeah.
Steve Gardner wanted their.
Joe Darn and Clay and all them, the school was the first house south of their old home place, so you knew where their old home place, didn't you? Archie Gardner lived there, you know, but the old school was there. Just a little ways the other side of 80 highway.
Do you
Of course, there
remember?
wasn't any 80 highway there then.
No. Do you remember any of your teachers?
Oh, yeah. Yes, Fred Thompson was one. You remember Fred? Fred Thompson married, well, he was Clell and Patnam's brother.
Mhm.
He taught. Leonard Davenport.
I remember Leonard in
Well,
the big
he
store
taught.
up here.
Yeah, he taught out there. Mr. Gus Lamb. He taught. I went to school to Gus Lamb.
Uh-huh.
And Miss Alice Carnes. She originally lived down around Draftonville.
Mhm.
She was a little, real small lady, and they went to school back then when they were big as, well, grown, almost, and they kind of get a little unruly. She couldn't handle them much. Couldn't do a lot with them big boys. They got Mr. Davenport up here, Leonard.
He could handle them.
I mean, he straightened them out. Woo. He really did straighten that bunch out there.
Talk about older people going to school now. The year I started to Blakely, which was a little north of Wadesboro, south of
Yeah,
Wadesboro,
I know where Blake lives.
Miss Carrie Redden was the teacher. Well, several of the men, they were young men, like Guy Jackson,
Yeah.
and James Parker, and
Yeah.
Grady Gordon, and
Yeah. Well,
some
I've
of-
got a,
and they asked her if they could come to school, and some of them, since there were no high schools nearby, they would go to school till they were
Yeah.
20 years old, I
Yeah.
guess, or maybe
Yeah.
21.
I've got a picture here someone gave me a year or two ago as it come out in the Murray Ledger. They cut it out, gave me, and all those boys, like you was talking about, Guy Jackson, Helen, and, well, just all those that went to school, there was a picture on there. I've got it here someplace now. But
Did you ever get many whippings at school?
I never did too many. I guess I needed some, but I managed to not get too many, but they used to get a lot of them, you know.
Oh,
I saw them give them whoopings going and a coming. Yeah.
I think I averaged about 2 a week for my whole career.
I never did get too many whoopings. I always, I don't know, I was kind of tried to behave. I guess I needed one occasionally, but
What about the games that you played? Do you remember any?
oh, played baseball mostly.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, that was a big game.
Uh-huh.
Baseball. Yeah.
As a young man growing up, did you go to any events at the school? What
Oh,
kind
yeah.
of?
Pie suppers.
Tell us about what a pie supper was like.
Don't you remember pie suppers?
Oh, I do, but I want
Yeah.
the radio audience to hear what it was
Yeah.
like.
Well, they'd bake pies and bring them and sell the pies. In other words,
Who
Some-
bought them?
huh?
Who bought
The men would buy boys and men would buy the pies. Say some girl that you kind of thought was cute and all, and you kind of liked her, she'd bring a pie. Well, you'd bid on that. A big price on it, see, to get her pie. Yeah, we had some good time back in their pie suppers, and had box suppers, and all
What
that
was the
kind.
difference in a pie supper and
Ah,
a box supper?
I don't remember. I don't remember. There's a little difference in what they had, I think, to eat or to bring
Maybe
in the
a
box.
complete meal. or
Maybe something like that.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little different. Yeah, I remember the pie suppers real well.
Did any of the
But-
boys ever try to run the bids up on you just for meanness?
Oh yeah, they would. Of course, didn't nobody have any money back then.
A
You know,
high
too
price.
much. But we'd try to get a little extra money, do something, you know, work it a little something, get a little money to buy them pies. Yeah, they'd bid against us. Just keep up on them pies.
I went to a pie supper one time, and I thought a girl named Fay Hendon was a very beautiful girl, so she brought a pie. And I had 45 cents. Well, most of the pies sold for a quarter,
Yeah.
but the boys all knew I wanted her pie, so some fella bid 40 cents. So I bid the last penny I had. Nobody ever bid any more. I don't guess anybody had any more money than that.
Well, boy, I'll tell you, we didn't have no money back then, Ray.
No.
Nobody very much had any money. It was pretty bad time back when I was a kid. We just didn't have anything. Or had plenty to eat, such as it was.
And what year were you
Beans
born?
1912.
Wadesboro,
August.
of course, was one of was the capital of Callaway County when it
Right.
included all of Marshall.
That's right.
And tell us about Wadesboro when you first remember it.
Well, I remember when there were 3 stores there. Had a doctor's office there and an old hotel, 3 grocery stores, and they had an old coffin. I don't know where they made them. I believe just the old box
Mm-hmm.
out there across the road from Covington's place of business.
Mm-hmm.
I remember that part about it. But as far as the courthouse and all, that's a little too far back for me.
Oh, yeah.
I've heard my daddy, he remembered it. I've heard him tell it, all about it, you know, when the courthouse was there. But I didn't, I don't know what year that was. Do
Well,
you?
yes, that is 1842 was the last year the courthouse was in
Oh, no
Wadesboro.
wonder we could.
So you couldn't possibly
No,
remember that.
no.
But you've remembered much more, for example, than I do.
Yeah,
Now,
the old,
when I was living there was one store. It was Paul Holland, in fact, ran it. I remember that.
when he put that in there.
Had a gas pump.
Yeah, they'd hang out, have buggies and park all around down there,
Yeah.
down the old spring, you know. You remember?
Perry Elkins and
Yeah.
Caddy Brown.
Yeah. There was a bunch of those boys around there, running around there, you know.
But there were 3 different stores when you can
I
first
remember.
recall it.
They were one in a house up there about where Caddy Brown lived.
Mhm.
And the best I remember, I could be wrong, but don't believe I am, Reddins run a store there.
Mhm.
Some of the Reddins that used to be out here around Union Hill.
Yes. One of them ran
It was
Peggy
in a
Ann
house.
Spring, didn't
Yeah, that's right. They lived in this house and had one room for a grocery.
Mhm.
I remember going there. I thought that was something to go in your house and be a grocery there. And it was. Of course, it didn't have a lot of groceries. You know, not
No.
a lot. But, and there was another one farther on down. I don't remember who run it or anything. Further on down on the edge of the bluff down there. I don't remember too much. I just remember at one time there was 3 different ones there.
Now, your dad farmed
That's
when
right.
you were
That's
growing
right.
up, so you learned
That's
to
right.
sucker tobacco.
Oh yeah, you better believe it.
You had to
We
learn.
had to do all our hoeing in by hoe.
Yeah.
Corn tobacco too. Chop it out, hoe tobacco. Sucker it and worm it. We didn't have nothing to spray it with to kill the worms.
No.
We caught them worms.
I remember doing the same thing.
Yeah, that.
Now, when did you meet Marie? Did you know her when you were young?
Yeah, we went to school. She went to school a while at Union Hill, but she came to Hardin most of the time.
Mhm.
When we started going to Union Hill, we just went on to Union Hill.
Mhm.
Now, Toy went to Hardin and Roy. Toy graduated here in 25, I believe, 25 or 26, Hardin High School. And Marie went to school at Hardin, but she went some to Union Hill. But see, we lived joining farm. Their land went back and joined us. And we had knew them ever since, well, always, you might say, ever since we were little kids.
They were just.
I remember when her mother died in 1919, and I knew her then. She was just 7 years old when her mother died. She died in October 1919. I remember what we was doing, the work we was doing the day she died. We was building a room on the house and was laying flooring, or my dad and them was. I was watching them, and they came and said Miss Cabot had passed away, and they quit. Mr. Har Brown and my dad and my mother and Miss Brown all went over there, and they lived in the big White House across the road from where you lived. And but I had knew Marie a long, long time, ever since we were kids.
Now, when did you get married?
1931. November the 1st, 1931.
What did you begin doing then? Did you start
I
farming?
farmed the first year or two. You couldn't make no money already. Tobacco and everything, you know, couldn't make no money. It didn't bring anything. $2 or $3 £100. So we did farm. We had to till we got a job. But then I got off on public work a little. I started in 1936 to transporting gasoline.
Now that was sort of a lifetime career for you,
Yeah,
wasn't it?
I did that 35 years, I guess.
Instead
I
of
did.
going to Detroit, well,
I stayed here and hauled gasoline.
How did you run up on that job?
Well, her uncle, it was contract hauling. He had a bunch of trucks, and he got a contract with Guff. And after we got married, well, he wanted to know if I could drive a truck. I said, well, I never did, but I believe I could. He said, well, if I get going, I'm figuring on going to hauling gasoline for Guff out of Paducah, and I'll give you a job if you want a job. Marie lived with, after her mother died, she lived with her uncle, Victor Putman, down at Fulton. He was originally from here, but he had lived at Fulton. And Marie lived with them a while till she got old enough to sort of stay with folks and get on her own.
Do you remember what your first salary was?
Yes, very well. $10 a week. And before that, I remember what I was doing. I was working on WPA, $21 a month. So when I got a job $10 a week, everybody's talking about how lucky and what a good job I had. $10 a week.
Well, it was
It
a
was
good job, wasn't it?
Sure was. And I did the first transporting gasoline. It was done in Benton and Murray. They'd always gotten it in tank cars on trains. We did the first. I brought the first load of gasoline in at Benton for Guff and at Murray to Guff Book Plant.
And you hauled out of the river terminal
At Paducah.
Yeah.
We started in Murray and Benton, Mayfield and Fulton. And he hired a guy lived down there around Fulton to haul to Mayfield and Fulton. And I lived here in Hardin, the next door here, what we call Preacher White House, where B next door here. The first year or two while I lived here, because I'd go to Benton and Murray. In other words, I'd go down in the morning and get a load and bring it up to Benton, go back to Paducah and get a load and bring it to Murray, unload in Murray and come back by here and leave a truck at home at night, be ready the next morning to go back again. We were here during the flood, and see, I started in 36, and in 38, he began getting more hauling. So he wanted me to move Paducah. So I moved there in 38 and stayed Paducah till 74.
Of course, you
But
were,
the last 5 years, well, I moved Bowling Green for a while, but they're still working for the same outfit.
Mhm.
They sent me to Bowling Green. They had a little Guff had a little terminal in Bowling Green, and they sent me up there in 1942, and I stayed till 47, and it came back to Paducah. But after Putnam and them died, Usher bought it. The same Usher that's got the transport now.
Mhm.
He bought it, and I worked for him a while. And I got off with Dairyman Incorporated, just milk people, and I worked the last 5 years with them. That was the best job I ever had in my life.
Mhm.
But I had to do long distance hauling. But they had good equipment, and I went everywhere. They'd haul milk everywhere. We'd pick up milk maybe in Wisconsin and bring it down through here, or haul it to Florida. And next week might be hauling from Florida back up here. Go to North Carolina, South Carolina, everywhere. Just wherever if there's a little short of milk here, and you couldn't keep milk, you see, you had to get rid of it.
Mhm.
It'd ruin on you. They had to get a sale somewhere, and they just haul it anywhere.
They kept a master salesman on the telephone and looking for shortages.
And I had to
surplus.
haul out of Louisville the last 3 or 4 years I retired. I worked out of Louisville with Dairyman Incorporated. We hauled Cincinnati, Dayton, and all the long distance hauling.
Mhm.
We hauled everywhere. You can just about name any city around, I've been there. I've been just about everywhere they are to go.
That reminds me of a country song. I heard a man, something saying, I've been everywhere.
Yeah, I've been everywhere. That's just about where it like me. I've been everywhere. I've hauled it.
Do you remember any unusual experiences? Or they might have been amusing, or they might have been frightening, I guess, that you...
Well, I've had everything you could just about name it to happen to me on the truck. I've had it to happen to me, all kinds of things to happen. But I never was in a serious accident. I've had a lot of people run into me and everything like that, but I never did get hurt anyway. I've got all kinds of safety records of driving.
Mhm.
But I never will forget one time I was coming from Paducah, just below Benton, on that levee, you know where the bridges are? It's in August, real hot weather. It come a little skip of rain, just a little shower, real hot. The weather was hot. The road was slick. I met a car right down over that bridge, and it was just a swapping ends.
Mhm.
I pulled over and stopped, and I saw she was going to run over me. It looked like anyway, and I thought once about getting out and running. I thought, well, then maybe I might get run over. I better not do that. I stayed in the truck. I stopped. It missed the cab part and hit the back trailer wheels, knocked that axle all the way plumb out from under it, and it just sat down on the road. I had loaded fuel oil on then. I was hauling gasoline. And it was a lady from Murray and her husband. I forgot their name, but he drove a bus up there out of Murray.
Mhm.
And she went ahead after she hit me and went off down in that water and had a little kid. And we had an ambulance down there. It didn't hurt her too bad, broke her nose. Got the kid out of the water. But things like that, you know, with
Pretty
gasoline,
scary,
it's scary.
Mhm.
Sure was. And I've saw so many wrecks and run up on every day nearly somewhere where I'd go. You'd see a bad wreck.
You want to try to, we just have about 3 minutes left. Could you describe Hardin for us and when you first remember it? What all
yes.
did it have here then?
Yes, I remember Hardin. It was a good-sized town. There were a lot of going on. I remember the two big stores, you know, and you could buy anything nearly in that place, you know, wagons or machinery, farm machinery, buggies, and everything else. And there's a drugstore, lumber company, the big liver stable right up the street here, and a drugstore. There's quite a bit of going on around here. A lot of people would come to Hardin, come from back over on out east, you know, in
From Aurora all the way,
Johnson Creek,
Olive.
all over in there. Saturday afternoon be the biggest crowd here. They'd usually have a big fight or two, drinking, and the harsh Warren was police, and he'd arrest them. If they got too rough, he'd arrest them. Had an old jail, you know, down here.
You know, I'd forgotten about Mr. Warren being chief of police.
Oh, I've seen him arrest many a person.
I remember him well, but I'd
Yeah.
just forgotten that he was chief of police.
Had an old jail, you know. Dan Black's, that's that same old building. He keeps his tractor or something in now. That was the old jail.
And you always had something to do because you
Oh.
could meet the train.
Well, the train, you bet. And ball game, it'd be a ball game over here, you know, at Hardin. They had some big games over there. That we had some good ball players up there.
Yeah.
You know, it played ball
Surely.
over there. I remember coming and sitting
Well,
and
we've got
watching.
about a minute left. Do you have anything you want to
Well-
mention, you thought about, you especially want to get on before we have
Well,
to sign off?
I remember mighty well, I might mention this, I remember mighty well the night Irby Hurt was took out of the bank up here.
Oh, and unsolved murder even now.
Yeah, that's right.
I
I spent all night here that night because he was missing and they were hunting him. We just stayed all night. I was hearing the sun come up the next morning.
I never
That-
did ask you about your children.
Well, we had 3 children, but we just got one left. 2 of them are died.
Any grandchildren?
Got 4 grandchildren.
Are they near enough to come to see
No,
you?
my daughter lived in California, out around Los Angeles. We were intending to go there the first of the month. My granddaughter's getting married, and Marie got sick and was in the hospital, and we didn't get to go. But my got 3 grand boys, and they live down in around below Benton, Sharp, and down in there. But my oldest daughter is still living. She's the only one. I had a boy, and yesterday would have been his birthday, the 8th day of October. He would have been 41 years old, and he died when he was 7 years old. And my daughter then, that married, you know, Brother Lake Riley's son, and she passed away in 76, I guess.
So you've
She had 3 boys.
you've had some tragedies and
Oh, you
some
bet. You
wonderful
bet. We've had
experience too, I guess.
I think, pretty rough going, a lot of it, you know, we've had a lot. She got hurt and was sick for got hurt in 1970.
Well, I appreciate your talking to me,
Yeah,
and
good
the
to
time
talk to
just
you,
goes
Ray.
so rapidly. This is
Yeah.
Ray Mofield. We've been visiting in the home of Rudy and Marie Jackson, now the mayor of the town. I wish I had time to ask him about all the city problems, but I guess he lives with that every day.
You probably saw this.
And
what they had in the
I
paper.
saw that article in the paper, and it was a wonderful story. It's very great. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
We
thank
return you now
Ray.
to our studios in Benton.